welcome any time. It is only human to commit a sin.
Yeah, I totally need to call down the Inquisition on this guy. Lordran has seen better days, and so has most of modern civilization. Yet there exists within us an odd attraction to watching the world die. Perhaps because there's an anticipation there, a part of us that innately knows that death is not really the end. As I record this, the news, as usual, is full of stories that put the new normal dreadfully on display. The types of crimes that would have been met with national outrage in my youth are today simply business as usual. The price we pay for a society that is pluralistic not just in its peoples and customs, but has adopted a plurality of core values. And while we try to maintain a "this is fine" semblance of stoic resignation, there is in the air a growing awareness that things cannot long continue as they are. Change is coming, and before new life, there will be death. Dark Souls is all about death, and not just in the "this game is hard and you will die a lot" sense of that term, though there is plenty of truth to that assessment. As influential as this game proved to be, with its many systems that have been, well, copied to death at this point, Dark Souls did not have a lot of hype surrounding its release back in 2011. At that time, FromSoft fans were quite rare here in the West. Yet I was among those day one buyers, as there was something about that early footage which sparked my imagination. I had not played From's prior title, Demon Souls, but this new game looked like a more polished, more refined take on that formula, and I figured it would hold me over until the release of another game I was obsessing about that year, a little title called Skyrim. Needless to say, I was more than held over. The thrill of having combat and exploration that felt like it carried actual risk was a breath of fresh air from the many exercises in hand-holding and so-called player empowerment which had flooded the market. You had to be daring to explore this world, but doing so was worth it, as each new discovery could make a big difference in how well you were able to overcome those challenges ahead. And while you might have to venture into a place well above your current level to make some of those discoveries, that sense of being where you shouldn't be, that also was part of the charm. Around you soared the decaying husks of a once great civilization, still hanging here and there onto a shadow of its former glory. Plot points were sparse and often rather vague, but you could tell that this land had a history, and also that the present age, the Age of Fire, was drawing to a close. Rather than the ever-popular post-apocalypse setting, Dark Souls delivered a pre-apocalypse. And you weren't necessarily there to save the day by putting a stop to it. You might be the very agent through whom the end of the age comes. If you like to watch hours-long video game retrospectives, the type which I don't really have the time to make, you'll likely hear that term liminal used in reference to this game. A liminal setting is a place that exists in between, teetering on the cusp of some major change or upheaval. As the saying goes, it's not the end of the world, but you can see it from here. While it's the land of Lordran that most hammers this feeling home, your character, the chosen undead, also exemplifies this state, being neither fully alive nor fully deceased. And moreover, even in the realm of morality, I expect most players will play this game by treading a path that is morally gray, in between outright good or evil. Ending the undead curse sounds nice, but you may have to cut short the future of a lot of other people to achieve that. And on the more concrete level of gameplay, there are also several nice weapons or items or armor sets that can only be attained, or can be attained much earlier, should you choose the dark side and slay some NPCs whose only crime against you is having stuff you want. This game has several endings, and spoiler warning, but regardless of which path you choose, there are no everybody lives happily ever after, squeaky clean ways of resolving things. Whether you prolong the Age of Fire or bring on the dark, every outcome has its cost in casualties. Much like Lordran's Golden Age was not achieved without Gwyn and company violently tearing down the old order. Dark Souls is a game I come back to every couple years. When I'm feeling burnt out on the latest releases and this hobby of gaming starts to lose its flavor, this is one of those titles which kind of reminds me, oh yeah, video games can actually be fun. That might sound odd, given how punishing it can be, but Dark Souls has that effect for me. And, like many FromSoft games, things become a lot less punishing once you learn the exploits. That too is a big part of the appeal. Also, part of why I find it hard to jump back into Elden Ring at this point. They were super aggressive at nerfing stuff with patches, which makes sense from a multiplayer standpoint, but for a single player guy like me, an overly balanced game ends up feeling boring. You lose the joy of finding those special, overpowered tools and abilities. The first Dark Souls has its problems. A few boss fights fall flat, and many have noted how several areas in the second half of the game feel rushed or unfinished. I don't disagree with those complaints, but neither do I feel that they ruin the experience. It is a lonely and, yes, liminal experience, and in that sense it perhaps feels more relatable than a game set in a dark fantasy setting probably should. Might it be that the real world is starting to resemble Dark Souls? Now, I don't mean to sound like a prophet of doom. Hope is a virtue, after all. But one doesn't bolster hope and face threats bravely by burying your head in the sand. And the threats currently facing us are many. Like the fading glory of Anor Londo, modern civilization would seem to be at its sunset. I've spoken before about the threat posed by religious apathy and the erosion of freedom of speech, a logical consequence of replacing Christ with the state, punishing those who utter the blasphemies of hate speech and misinformation, terms which whoever holds power gets to define. There's also the existential threat of low birth rates, the denigration of the traditional family, the engineered colonialism of mass migration, fueled by the bribe of social welfare. Indeed, many signs point to the old order passing away, with great numbers eager for the new global enslavement, whether it be a theocratic enslavement with religious courts of law, a communist enslavement in which the state is master, and master takes care of you, so long as you behave and believe as master says. Or perhaps we'll end up enslaved to a superior race of our own creation through the rise of AI. What might be the most telling sign of the times, however, is that which was perceived by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who went from fighting for the Red Army to being a prisoner in a Soviet gulag. A decline in courage may be the most striking feature that an outside observer notices in the West today, he reflected when giving his speech at Harvard, later adding, "Must one point out that from ancient times, a decline in courage has been considered the first symptom of the end." Now, let us not confuse bravery with being quick to use force. One can be both cowardly and violent, particularly when the odds are stacked in your favor. But just as courage ought not to go together with cruelty, neither ought kindness to go together with pacifism or timidity. One of the worrying signs Solzhenitsyn perceived was the West's modern tendency to baptize cowardice by calling it compassion. The examples are many, but one of the most striking to me is the retreat from the notion of reciprocity. Almost every underprivileged minority is a powerful majority somewhere. When one culture bends over backwards to be welcoming and accommodating, without ever asking the other culture to reciprocate where they hold power, is that really compassion, or is it just cowardice? This is not to say that acts of kindness should always be conditional. Far from it. But in the opposite extreme, when a nation or culture never so much as asks for reciprocity, there grows not only a lack of self-respect, but also missed opportunities to nudge the world toward being a better place. A healthy pressure could be exerted toward promoting things like freedom of religion and women's rights in places where those values are not widely embraced. Much good could be accomplished through taking a stronger stance toward reciprocity, which stems from the simple principle of fairness. This shouldn't be a controversial idea, but that would require courage, especially courageous leaders, something which, again, is not in strong supply. We embrace things like DEI and affirmative action, but where those who benefit are the majority, is there any call for them to place their minorities at the front of the line for school admissions, for jobs or promotions or government positions? We allow foreign funding from places like Saudi Arabia for the construction of thousands of mosques, yet allowing, say, investors in Texas to fund the building of a single Christian church on Saudi land. Why, it's out of the question. We dare not even ask, much less require other peoples to reciprocate in kind. As you fight your way across Lordran as the chosen undead, there can also come a feeling of loneliness. Why is a courageous spirit so rarely found? Instead, an air of defeat and despair hangs thick over the land. Perhaps because it's easier to fear. In the realm of belief, one might look to the popularity of scientism, meaning not the love of science, but the fear of believing anything that cannot be scientifically verified. Faith, in contrast, always takes a measure of courage, risking belief in the unprovable, living without the safety net of certainty. It can be a little hard, a little scary, and thus is not always very popular. But it's one of the key reasons why we're here in the first place. Ours is a world that is passing away. The heavens and the earth shall pass away, said Christ, but my word will not pass away. Putting courage into practice is one of the few good things we can do here, which we cannot do in heaven, at least not in the same way, as heroism like that requires risk, and well, those in heaven can no longer be imperiled. While civilization may be sliding toward oblivion, something does lie beyond, both for the world and for our souls. Amid the darkness, God has purchased for us a ray of hope. So how will you and I reciprocate? And that's all I've got for today. May you go with God, may you like and subscribe, and may we pray for one another. Until we meet again.